I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Kirk, for joining us here today. And thank you, everybody else. Hopefully you enjoyed the breakout sessions. We're excited to have a conversation with a guy who's super knowledgeable, been around many startups, lots of lessons learned, and very well connected in the Atlanta and the healthcare ecosystem. So a great resource for folks to listen to and learn from on today's call. So Kirk, thanks for joining us here today. We really appreciate it.
Good to be here, my man.
And I think, for the agenda for today, what we'll do is we'll just start a little bit with some of Kirk's background and why he got into healthcare. We'll move into some of the startup experiences around some of the things Kirk's seen on vetting ideas and how to navigate the complexities of healthcare and some lessons learned through all the startups that he's worked with. And then we'll wrap up with some forward-looking stuff around trends in healthcare and things Atlanta can do to be better positioned to support health IT startups. So that's the rough agenda. As we go, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll save those for the end, but feel free to put them in the chat and then JC will help at the end. So with that, Kirk, just to get us going, maybe just a little bit about your background of, how and why you got into healthcare.
Yeah, it was, I want to say it was highly methodical and I put a lot of thought into it, but it was one of the best job offers I got out of college. So I went to Florida A&M University, economics major, and I was interviewing with different companies. And one was the consumer division of what is now Pfizer, and to be a rep. And so I love sales, been in sales since early as a teenager. And it was something about, of all the job offers, I got to work from home, got a company car, got to travel, can get bonus, get stock. I was like sold. And so I didn't really know what I was getting into, but the industry at that time, especially on the consumer side, I ended up working in Texas, was really booming, and then understanding the impact that you're having on patient lives. So I started off in the consumer division, Pfizer, went to the biotech division of Johnson & Johnson, and then I was one of the first employees at this little tiny startup pharmaceutical company nobody heard of called Takeda Pharmaceuticals. So I was one of their first employees. In fact, I was employee 120. And many people don't know, Takeda now is a global pharma company. But when I joined, they were in the top floor of an office building in Lincolnshire, Illinois. And we had no drug. We had not a lot of infrastructure. There were more consultants than there were employees. And that was an interesting ride. We went from no drug to $1 billion with a B in 18 months. So it was quite a ride, seeing the growth, and wore various hats there. And then, that really gave me the bug to really understand, especially in chronic diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and then left there to go to a nanotechnology spinoff out of Northwestern. And that is where I got to learn kind of the backside, the less known side of pharmaceuticals. We had a division that had a technology to detect counterfeiting and illegal diversion of high-end goods, but specifically pharmaceutical products. So that's where I had global responsibilities for Asia, North America, Europe, and even did some legislative work on the Hill, as well as in Europe, because in startups you wear many hats. So I got to do that, and then ended up being a CEO of a drug discovery company out of Florida State. So back in Tallahassee to our roots. And that's where I learned the whole tech transfer process. So working with a professor that was trying to license some IP that he created out of Florida State. And then that's how I actually got connected into ATDC through some connections, and then joined ATDC, raising money to launch the healthcare program, and kind of took off from there.
Very cool. I love sort of that kind of got into healthcare, and once you stayed, you just saw all the opportunities and challenges, and instead of let me go after it.
Exactly.
Maybe talk through that part a little bit, Kirk. I've seen starting with a Pfizer, right, and having done some pharma bio type stuff, and then also as you started moving to ATDC and sort of the real early stage startups. Talk a little bit about some of the things that are different in that sort of the larger corporate side versus sort of the smaller startup side.
Yeah, so the corporate side, one, the difference is everything is kind of done for you. So even as a rep, our sales aids, sales materials were given to us, marketing materials were given to us. You have operationally, if you have a company vehicle, or if you have, travel, all that stuff is already done. So the good thing is, in my time in the industry, I wore a lot of those different hats. So I was a salesperson, I carried a bag. I led salespeople. So I went through management training or leadership development training. I was a director. I was in marketing. I worked on data analytic projects. So I also was called a regional account manager. So I did the negotiations with payers. So I worked intimately with understanding how insurance coverage works and the relationship between providers and payers. So understanding how all those different pieces are connected. But I'll tell you, the one thing that probably had the most impact on understanding healthcare is when I was with Orthobiotech, Johnson & Johnson. I got to do, over the course of a year, probably like 30 preceptorships with physicians. So I made rounds with doctors. And so I understand I got to see from the physician's eyes what patient care looks like. So I was in the room when, patients were, told that they had cancer, or I was in the room when they were told that these are the drugs you're going to get, or this is the chemo you're going to get. I was in the room when the nurses are trying to help patients manage side effects, and going to patient advocacy groups. And so that's the one thing I think that helps give me a good perspective is it's not about how great technology is. It's what are the needs of the patient, and how can we help empower providers to make the patient-provider relationship stronger, and ultimately help patients get the care that they need, no matter where they are, no matter what their socioeconomic status is. I think that's kind of the anchoring part that helps me kind of have a different lens when it comes to technology and healthcare.
I love that. So going to jump to that a little bit later, but let's go there now. One of the things that to me is fascinating about healthcare, as you were alluding to, is there are so many different types of constituents, right? You got the patients, you got the payers, you got the providers, you may have the pharma. How have you learned how to navigate and understand those different groups, so that as you're starting a business or selling a product, you put yourself in the right mindset to understand everybody's impact or role in that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, even having been in healthcare for 20 plus years, still figuring it out. It still changes, right? But I think there's some core tenets that are critical to understand. And one of the first things that helps me understand, especially where technology is going to have an impact, is to think about the magic question, like who's going to pay for it. So healthcare is one of those interesting models where the consumer really, in some instances, patients rather, don't pay for the service. So it's the insurer. So when I look at a technology or a solution, or kind of think of healthcare, I think about the personas of the patients based upon how healthcare is delivered to them. So you kind of think of are these patients a Medicare patient, a Medicaid patient, a commercially insured patient, a government, the patient is in the military, or a cash pay. And then there's even flavors of all of those. And each of those different buckets have a persona that's associated with how they get care, where they go to care, their reluctance or acceptance to using technology, the education, and then you kind of layer in language, age, ethnicity, all these other kind of factors, diversity factors that impact how they receive education, how they receive, how they talk to their doctor, the information that they get. Because if you can understand that, it helps you really understand the message that needs to resonate to the provider or the health system that's going to be delivering care to those patients, right? So that's one thing that helps keep me focused when I hear something. And the one thing I can say is speaking with enough startups, many times they don't say it they don't think it, proactively, but whatever they create, more times than not, is usually geared towards a Medicare patient or commercially insured patient. And they don't think it, But even those two patients, how you sell to them and how you sell to the providers that take care of those patients, how you sell to the health systems, how you sell to the payers themselves are all dynamically different. And the message, no matter what your product is, has to be tweaked so that it resonates and has a direct line between the payer, the provider, and the patient, because it's a different story depending upon what that payer situation looks like.
I love that, sort of starting with the who's going to pay for it, and then making sure you make the connection to how that pitch and value proposition is different for each person. Because to your point, oftentimes all are going to be involved in your product being successful.
Yeah, and I'll just give you an example. And it doesn't matter, how small, how big your company is. I was a part of launched a small biotech company out of San Diego. I was with their company called Zogenix, and we were launching a new medication in the pain space. And make a long story short, great medication, well-funded, publicly traded company, hired probably 15 plus salespeople across the kind of Southeast Atlantic region. So we built this great company, trained everybody, but the product was geared towards really a Medicare population. We never got on the formularies in enough time, and the company ended up having to lay off most of the sales organization because it couldn't generate enough revenue to sustain the sales organization. So even a publicly traded biotech company that has all these smart people, great product, didn't get the product on formulary and have the insurers cover it in time, and it had a significant impact on the company in its future. But that's, again, you have to think ahead and really plan accordingly to be able to understand how the product is going to be paid for. Doesn't matter how good it is, doesn't matter how good it is if nobody's going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. No, so true. Let me ask one more question, sort of the sales side in your background, then we'll transition to the early stage startups and getting the idea going.
Yep.
Obviously, you mentioned you did sales, coming out of school and stuff. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was, AT, go be in sales. Because no matter what you do in life, you're in sales, whether you're convincing your spouse to do something or anything. Talk to me about just what you learned starting in sales and how that's been helpful to you in your career.
Oh, good. So I sold clothes when I was in high school, and I had a manager that was really hard on me, but one is to, listen to the customer and not always try to think that whatever it is you're trying to sell, they need, and you could just make them buy it, So it's really understanding the more you understand your customer, and the more that you're intentionally curious about what makes them tick, the better you can, the more they will actually tell you how to sell them, right? Instead of the proverbial show up and throw up, you just show up, you just want to say as much as you can. And you figure, if I have 5 minutes, I'm just going to pepper this person with as many facts and statistics, and I'm just going to give it to them, and they're just going to be so overwhelmed they're going to buy it. It doesn't work like that. And then particularly when I not only won sales awards and got promoted, but then really got into some of the science of selling and the techniques of selling, and really, the methods of selling. The big thing is trying not to think of it as selling, but having a conversation where you are going to get to a point where you can find something where you mutually benefit from, whatever it is that you're trying to represent. And sometimes it's not for everybody, and sometimes it's a perfect match. But I don't believe in the whole kind of the slimy sales, because some people hear sales like, oh God, that's gross. You're used car salesman or whatever. But you can really be the person that can help bring solutions that make an impact and really change people's lives. But it's the way you do it and how you say it, and words matter. And again, AT, we met years ago and we're still connected. So again, a lot of it is also based upon, especially in the South, relationships. Everybody on this call, think about major purchases that you made, and you probably didn't buy them from somebody that you thought was like, I will never talk to this person ever again. We tend to do business with people we like. We have relationships. There's a simple 3-step process: know, like, trust. And the people that you trust and develop that that core tenet of the relationship are the people that you'll tend to go back to. And so I think that's the common thread, that relationships matter. You develop trust. And once a customer, always a customer. I think that's an important thing, where once sometimes the mistake is once you've sold something, it's like, oh, they bought, I got the money. Okay, let me go and just find the next person. And you forget, all that's gone into getting that person across the finish line, when really once the deal is signed, a lot of the hard work begins, because you have to protect what you sold. And then you also have to think that one person has the ability to influence other people, introduce you to other people. And if you can continue to build upon that relationship, it builds this, growing net that always can catch you no matter what it is that you sell.
I love that. Some great lessons there, Kirk. And one of the things I want to go deeper in that you said was really understanding the customer and what they're trying to solve, and not just, coming in and, the show up and throw up approach. And I see that with startups a lot, right? That, startups come in and just start vomiting their idea and their cool tech, not even paying attention to, what the customer's problem is. So let's take that same approach. And now your experiences at ATDC and advising lots of startups. Yeah. How do you start coaching a startup on, you're at that idea stage? And I say, Kirk, I got this great idea. How do you encourage them to do some of that customer discovery to vet and understand the problem?
Yeah. And I'll apologize, because sometimes I can be a little blunt. Maybe it's just, getting an old man, becoming an older man. You don't have to sugarcoat as much. But, the reality is, there's brilliant people that I've met across my time, and meeting founders, across Atlanta, across the country. And, and even when I was at my nanotechnology startup, just amazing people, IQs off the chart, way smarter than I am, but nobody cares about that. Nobody cares how smart you are. What people really care is, do you understand me and my problem? And if you can understand what makes me tick, or the problems that I have, or the needs that I have, then I'll be more likely to listen to you. And so when people have an idea, I'm like, that's great. I just had this conversation with, and I think everybody here has some idea, and I always encourage them to think about it, really get it out of your head, and go through the process. There's a process that works. When I was at ATDC, we professed the lean startup methodology, that whole mindset that if you build it, they will come. That does not work in more times, right? You have to do the work up front. And sometimes if that work requires you to actually talk to people, do customer discovery, and find out not if your idea is great, but what is it that people need, and does your idea align with what people need? And then also, again, one of the sometimes, and I'm sure ET, you get this too, you can't shortcut the process, because you're going to pay for it one way or another. And so some people say, I have this great idea. I talked to my mom, I talked to my cousin, talked to my best friend. They thought it was great. So I put in $15,000 to build an MVP. Now I'm going to go to market. And Kirk, this is just so great. I'm so excited you're at ATDC. I just need you to introduce me to the VCs that because I know once they hear my idea, they're going to give me, $5 million to make this. This is going to be the next, whatever. And sometimes I'm like, well, first of all, have you ever had $5 million? So what makes you think that somebody feels comfortable giving you $5 million if you've never had more than $10,000 in your bank account? And I'm just using that as an example. But that's also part of trusting the process, identifying the right team. There's nothing, no success that I did by my own. I had phenomenal people around me. I like to keep phenomenal people around me that have talents and experience and acumen, and a network of people that are going to be able to help me when I need. And AT, you're on that list as well. And so I think that's the other thing is you also, on top of the idea, have to be curious, do the work in terms of talking to people and understanding what makes them tick and what their really needs are, their pain points are, but then building the right, I call it your board of directors, right? The people that have the knowledge to help you understand how to navigate this space. And the cool thing is, like, if you have an idea, kind of 3 or 4 different ways to look at it. You go through customer discovery, you ask some questions, you have to be coachable. It's another thing I wanted to mention. And as you talk to people through the customer discovery process, you'll find, oh, I was way off, but I did learn something. This is what people really need, and this is something that's missing. Or you learn that, like, oh, I nailed it. I'm spot on. And I want to go through the process. Or you learn, like, I really don't want to do customer discovery. I just have this idea and I just want to build it because it's going to make me happy. That's great too, right? That's great also. And even some of the people in academia that I've talked to that have these great ideas, they create tons of intellectual property. But when I really get down to the discussion, like what do you really, really want to do? Like, do you really want to create stuff and license it? Or do you really want to create a company and have to hire people and manage people and raise money? And many times they're like, I just want to license stuff, so just really getting to the heart of what people want and then helping them understand the process. But the idea and coachability and being around the right people that are really going to help and guide you, those are some, that coachability and the right network of folks is paramount, probably the top of the list, more important than the idea, so I know I said a whole lot, but those are some things that I've seen, from my time working with startups, continually working with startups and people that just have ideas. I just encourage people, when you have ideas, find people to help get them out of your head and vet it out. So at least it's not just gonna, be there 10 years, like, oh, I wish I would have done something. Then you see it on TV, so I've done that. I'm sure you have as well. But I encourage people even have an idea journal, and you might not do anything with it, but when you start to see you have a lot of ideas and maybe it's just putting the right effort behind it and understanding the process, then you can start finding out which ones really have merit and then kind of doing the process from there.
So many good things in there, Kirk, that we can go deeper on, but I love what you said there about the process, and maybe we'll start going that a little bit more. That 100% agree that, what I see is a lot of entrepreneurs who say, I have this great idea or this great tech, and we're all doers, right? We just want to go build something, because when you build something, you can show people I've built something.
Right.
But they shortchange that customer discovery process. And all the great companies and ideas I've seen, you pivot multiple times through that process. And to your point, if you skip those early customer conversations around understanding the problem, it's way harder to change your idea when you've already built something and have something set in your head than if you're open-minded to, let me really understand Kirk's problem and what he's trying to solve, and how do I build it together with them.
And you know what? Nobody's immune to it. I won't say this person's name, but when I was at ATDC, you meet all kinds of people, right? And so I met a well-known professional athlete in the Atlanta area that played and was very well known for one of the Atlanta teams, right? So I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible. But by the time they got to me and we had a conversation, they had spent over $200,000 on like a MVP, had done no customer discovery. And after talking, he basically was like, so what you're saying is all the money, the $200,000 I spent is basically a waste, and I got to start over, because they were just so far off base. And even just doing a judicious amount of research and homework on what is really out there in the marketplace. So just because you have a great idea, that's cool. But if there's 30 other things that are like it, and it's just, a small, if you don't have any really key differentiating factors, it's not going to be that big of a market player. But again, depending upon what your mission, you just got to know what you're getting into. But again, nobody's immune to making those mistakes. I will point out one person that I like to talk about, somebody that really epitomizes the process of iterating. So you might know Farrah Allen, that's the CEO of the lab. So I remember meeting Farrah when I first was at ATDC, going through the customer discovery process, and she would come religiously, and I can't even remember what she was working on, but she basically killed it. And then she disappeared and came back with another idea, and it iterated, and it ended up being the labs, right? So there's a prime example, brilliant person, driven, coachable, what just trusted the process, and look at where she is now. So that's one idea. I'm sure AT, you have your own. We see it work, but we also see more time than that people that want is like, oh, I'm just so excited. I'm just going to do this anyway. And Kirk doesn't understand my vision, my dream, and he's not supportive. Like, I am supportive, but I'm real. So I just don't want you to waste time and money to things that you don't want to throw away.
100% on the time and money. It's life and time and money are limited, right? And so much better to kill an idea without spending much time and money to give yourself the opportunity to move on to something better versus dragging out time and money on an idea that hasn't been vetted. One of the things we talk about is, truly finding that authentic demand. I tell people all the time, whether I think it's a good idea or not, I'm right and wrong plenty of times. Whether you think it's a good idea or not, what matters is what do those potential customers think?
Exactly.
And not just what do they think, because everybody will tell you that's an interesting idea, or that's a great idea, or yeah, I'd use that. And they're just being nice to you, really.
Right.
But how many of them actually will put money down or say, let's go build it together because the problem is so real? But when you find that, you have such a stronger base and a higher chance of success.
Many people will create the greatest product that no one will ever buy.
And then it's hard to understand why will nobody buy it? It looks great.
It's great.
I told them they wanted it.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my favorite stories, I was earlier in my career, I was talking to a bunch of customers on an idea and they said, well, AT, if you go build XYZ, we'll buy it. And so I was like getting the team all together. Hey, we got to go build this. And it looks like this. And so I went and built a bunch of this stuff and came back and said, here it is. And guess what? Guess how many people bought it? Nobody. Right. They were just being nice to you, but really got to co-create together. Well, I know we're coming up on 10 minutes here, a couple last questions, and then we'll do some Q&A. So if you have any questions for Kirk, feel free to put them in the chat. But
hey, AT, can I something you said I wanted to go back to real quick, if you don't mind. So that's something about also selling to providers, is that what I've seen over and over and over, and I've had this conversation when you're selling to doctors, that doctors and sometimes healthcare professionals and customers in general, they don't like to hurt your feelings, right? So many times providers will say, oh, I love this, it sounds great. And I've seen this even in my time in the biopharma industry, where the rep is presenting and the doc's like, oh, this is great, I'm going to prescribe this product, I'm going to use it in my procedure, and they never do. And sometimes it's the fact that they just don't want to be real with you or hurt your feelings, but there's no way that they're going to change what they're doing because you haven't made a compelling case to make it worth experiencing the pain of change. So that was just something that you said I wanted to make sure I touched on also.
Yeah, 100%. So two last questions, Kirk. One is packaging that all up together, that value prop after you've learned the customer discovery, and then, healthcare, you have a consumer B2B startup. I can go put a landing page up tonight and start selling widgets or software, but healthcare is a little more complex than that.
Right.
So as you're vetting a healthcare idea and starting to feel that, any lessons learned or thoughts on how to create that? What's the right go-to-market process, given the different constituents, given, hey, there's the pilot word in healthcare, like how do you advise startups on crafting the right go-to-market process?
I think it's, one is understanding, again, I'll go back to the patient demographic, right? And who's going to pay for it, how they're going to be paid for. And then also understanding, especially if you have some kind of digital tool and you're selling it, is understanding the message for the decision makers. And those all are different, right? The IT message, there's an exec, if you have to go through like an executive committee, the executive message, the clinician message, right? Having a clinical champion, and then also the user, right? Because sometimes you might sell a digital tool to a hospital system. IT has to integrate it to the EMR. That's the whole process of making sure you have your stuff together there. If you have to get, depending upon the cost of it, it has to go through a committee, or understanding, whose budget that's going to come out of and being able to articulate ROI. That's kind of one discussion. The physician, whether this is, cardiology or whatever therapeutic area, they have to understand it. But sometimes, even though the providers might want to use it, the person that delivers the tool to the patient might be a nurse, it might be a pharmacist, it might be the medical assistant, it might be a physical therapist or something. So understanding the process of healthcare and how that product gets from you, how it gets paid for, how it gets delivered to the patient. And even if it's, medicine, if it's, I think I met with somebody in the breakout that has like nutrition, right? So if it's nutrition, and you're going directly to consumer, who's the persona that represents the key person that you're selling to? So whether that is, ages 40 to 60, 25 to 30, whatever the case may be, but really understanding the persona and aligning and understanding the process to get the product to the persona who pays for it, and making sure you're clear on that process. Those are all things that are very paramount to think through up front.
I love that. Really thinking through the whole process of everybody involved, because I see in startups, but especially in healthcare startups, like I've got this great idea that of course logically it makes sense, but healthcare is broken in a lot of ways for a lot of reasons, and you can't ignore the way it works without navigating that way. Well, Kirk, let me give you one last question here to wrap up, and I see there's some questions in the chat we'll go to here in a minute, but thinking Atlanta and healthcare and entrepreneurship, what are some things that Atlanta does well to support entrepreneurs, and what are some things that we could improve on going forward?
Oh, this is a question I get in trouble for. So I think, this is a unique place in Atlanta where the ecosystem and the support reflects a diverse patient population that reflects our nation. So I remember speaking to providers and said, like, look, if you can figure out how to get this product to my most complicated patient, which is English as a second or third language in a rural area with no insurance, but they're the ones that complain to me the most because they have the most needs. If you can help me with those patients, then I'll you can have all the rest of my business. So I think Atlanta has a great sense of how to address and how to speak the language to a diverse population. And our startup culture actually reflects that as well. And I think that's important, especially in healthcare, because through COVID, we've seen the impact of COVID disproportionately affected, African Americans or underserved populations in rural health, more just because they didn't have access to care, access to information. So I think that's something that we do really well. I think that as a city, there's an opportunity for us to tell a better story on how we package everything that we have. And for those of you that are old enough, sometimes I feel like we're the Rodney Dangerfields of healthcare and innovation. Like, we get no respect because of my role at Together Health, which is a national consortium of digital health leaders across the country. So I work with Mass Challenge, I work with Texas Medical Center and Matter and HealthBox and Cedars-Sinai. They all do great things. But when you talk about healthcare innovation, Atlanta is not top of mind, and it should be, right? And I think that we have the opportunity to do that. I think we need more prominent industry partners. So from big pharma to big medical device companies to come here, kind of set up shop and plant roots and partner with us so that our startups have, another thing I'll say is, I think our health systems can improve upon the way that they streamline and introduce innovation into their health systems, because it's kind of disjointed. I know Wellstar has a new program, Emory has a program over there, but collectively that's not cohesive as I've seen it in other ecosystems. So I think that's something else that we can do a better job at.
Awesome. Well, Kirk, really appreciate a lot of the great nuggets today around, building the team and navigating the sales process and vetting that idea. JC, maybe I'll pull you on. I see a couple of questions coming through in the chat. Maybe you can pick one or two of those to wrap up with.
There's a lot. So Kirk, first things first, thank you. I don't know if you're going to be here for a little bit, but they want to know how to connect with you. So maybe you can throw your LinkedIn or however you'd like in the chat afterwards. And then it looks like some of them, being mindful of time here, are talking about connecting. That's a big theme here. So maybe you could say, okay, I've got two questions here. How it looks like a user is looking to collaborate with others on ideas, right? So how would you, any resources to collaborate with others in the space? And then they're wanting to connect with people on customer discovery, right? Like, how do you connect in that area specifically? Is there networking or what, diving deeper into the customer side, those two insights, any area there you could provide?
Yeah. So on the connection side, I mean, you are already in the right place, and half the battle is just showing up. So I think being connected with people like AT. There's even like ATDC, they have an entrepreneurship night that's once a month, and I can't remember what night that is. But there's thriving networks here in Atlanta in the startup scene. So I think that's one thing. So connect with me. I just put my LinkedIn also in the chat. On the customer discovery side, there's a class. I'm sure AT, if you guys do something around customer discovery, I know ATDC has a class on that as well. And there's books like the Lean Startup, and of course I'm having a brain fart. I can't remember the
Mom Test is one of my other favorite ones.
Yeah. So again, you have to do a little work on the front side. So read some of those books, but once you understand the process, and it's really just collecting data and being able to ask the right question. You can do customer discovery at Starbucks. You can do it at your school, depending upon what it is you're asking. But there is a process, and there's a couple of resources I just mentioned. Those two books that the Lean Startup, that's it, is the book, and the other one that AT just mentioned, give good models and processes on how you do customer discovery.
Yeah, great. I'll do maybe one more here. And there's a couple that we might miss, but what is the best way to integrate SaaS sales into med tech? Any thoughts?
Oh, that's a whole nother
I know.
So the one thing I'll say with selling SaaS products is one, understanding kind of the complexity of who you're selling to. It goes back to that. So if you're selling a product that is used by providers, does it have to be integrated to into their EMR? Which, just when you think about the increasing threats against hospital systems and cybersecurity, CIOs at most hospital systems, if you're not in the respective app store of their EMRs, like the app Epic App Orchard or Cerner Code, more times than not, CIO is going to say no. Like, I don't have time to deal with that. And unless you have clinical champions that really see that much of a need. In terms of SaaS models, they work, but you have to be initially creative in finding out the right price point, the right structure, because there's implementation costs, there's integration costs, then there's a recurring cost of actually your SaaS model. Do you price per seat, per site? So there's some other nuances there. Again, that will help you. What will help you in that is getting with the right mentors, getting with the customers that you're selling to, understanding a little bit about their buying cycle and their pain points, and then understanding what works best if you're selling the license by provider, by patient. So there's different pros and cons, but that's a loaded question. I'm sure AT, you and I we can do a whole nother hour.
Right, do part two.
SaaS models, right.
Well, awesome. I know we're up at 9 o'clock here, but thank you everybody so much for joining. Kirk, really especially, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. I know you got a busy schedule. Just real quick on the screen, a couple of things. We have a Atlanta Startup Combos Meetup coming up in June, and then we'll do our next healthcare entrepreneur meetup sometime this summer, June or July. We'll probably have a couple startups present what they're working on. And then there's a link, atlanaventures.com/healthcare. You can see all the recordings of past meetups as well as local companies and other resources for entrepreneurs. So 9 o'clock again. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And you all have a great day.
AT, thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, Kirk.
Thank you, Kirk. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.